On a crisp April morning, Miles Corbin stepped onto the weathered porch of his great-aunt's cabin, coffee in hand, ready to photograph the egrets that danced along the creek behind his 3-acre plot. The air smelled of pine and promise, but as his eyes swept toward the water, the mug slipped from his fingers, shattering on the boards. Where the creek should have been a lively ribbon of water teeming with minnows, crawfish, and the occasional heron, there was nothing but a slab of gray concrete stretching upstream like a scar. Dead fish lay scattered across its surface, their silver scales glinting under the rising sun. Miles's heart pounded as he sprinted to the creek bed, his camera already documenting the abomination. As a former environmental engineer turned wildlife photographer, he knew this wasn't just vandalism. This was an ecological crime, and it ran right through his land. Before he could process the devastation, a black SUV roared down his private drive, kicking up gravel. Out stepped Arthur Sterling, president of the Summit Ridge Estates HOA, in a suit that screamed money and a grin that oozed deceit. "Morning, Miles," he called, as if they were buddies instead of adversaries locked in a years-long battle over Miles's refusal to sell his land. "Just checking on some drainage work. Hope we didn't bother you." Miles's jaw tightened. "Drainage work? You mean burying my creek in concrete?" His voice was steady, a trick he'd learned from years of handling slippery clients. Sterling's smile flickered. "Now let's not get dramatic. The HOA voted to fix erosion issues. This creek was a problem for Summit Ridge. We're doing you a favor, less flooding." Miles laughed, sharp and bitter. "A favor? This creek's older than your family tree, Arthur. It feeds the county wetlands. You just broke a dozen environmental laws." Sterling's eyes betrayed a flash of doubt, but he recovered fast. "Our lawyers say it's legal. And frankly, Miles, we've been patient. 6 offers for your property, all declined. Your shack's dragging down our million-dollar homes." Miles raised his camera, snapping a shot of Sterling against the concrete wasteland. "Get off my land, Arthur. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." That evening, Miles sat at his great-aunt's oak desk, sifting through yellowed deeds that smelled of dust and history. His great-aunt Eleanor had been obsessive about records, and buried in a 1947 document was a clause that stopped him cold. The natural waterway known as Corbin Creek shall remain unobstructed in perpetuity, with rights to its flow granted to all downstream ecosystems. The HOA hadn't just trespassed, they violated a water rights agreement older than their gated community. Miles's laptop hummed as he dug into public records, his engineer's instincts guiding him to a bombshell. HOA meeting minutes, sloppily redacted, outlining a scheme called Operation Streamline. Sterling had planned to choke the creek, flood Miles's land, and force a sale when the damage made it unlivable. The audacity was staggering, but one name stood out: Grace Sullivan, a board member who'd voted against the plan. Miles made a mental note to track her down. The next day, he found Ray Miller, the contractor whose name appeared on the HOA's work order. Miller's trailer office reeked of stale coffee, and his eyes widened when Miles showed him photos of the concrete. Sterling swore the permits were handled, he muttered, rubbing his weathered hands. "Paid me cash, 30% above rate, said it was routine. I've got kids, man. I needed the job." He admitted Sterling insisted on nighttime work to avoid questions. Armed with this, Miles spent a week documenting the fallout. His old engineering gear measured rising water tables as the concrete dam backfired, turning Summit Ridge's manicured lawns into swamps. Drone footage captured pools forming in million-dollar yards, basements filling, and retention ponds overflowing. The irony was almost poetic. Sterling's plan to ruin Miles was drowning his own empire. Soon, the homeowners noticed. The Barretts, whose colonial mansion bordered Miles's land, were the first to snap. Mrs. Barrett, usually poised in her athleisure, screamed at a landscaping crew as her $50,000 garden sank into mud. "This is a swamp," she shrieked, her voice carrying across the property line. By Monday, Sterling called an emergency HOA meeting at the Summit Ridge Clubhouse, a gaudy monument to new money. Miles arrived early, his laptop loaded with data. The room buzzed with 60 furious residents, and Sterling's usual charm faltered when he spotted Miles in the back. "We're addressing the drainage issues," he began, but a homeowner interrupted. "My basement's got 6 inches of water." Miles raised his hand. Point of order. May I speak? Sterling had no choice under public comment rules. Miles's slides filled the screen, hydrological charts, before and after creek photos, and a damning timeline. This concrete barrier is flooding your homes, he said. The room exploded with shouts. Grace Sullivan stood. Did the board secure permits for this? Sterling stammered. They're in process. Grace's eyes narrowed. The county has no record of any applications. Sterling pointed at Miles, his face purple. He's sabotaging us. Miles smirked. I'm a photographer, Arthur. The only thing I've manipulated is my lens. Your contractor, Ray Miller, says you paid him cash to skip permits. Want to hear the recording? Silence fell. Then, Diane Vance, the county environmental officer, walked in, holding a cease and desist order. Mr. Sterling, we need to talk. Vance set up shop in Miles's dining room. Her maps and files painted a grim picture. I've been investigating Summit Ridge for months, she said. Your creek gave me the smoking gun. Sterling's company, Sterling Developments, had built Summit Ridge on protected wetlands using forged documents and bribes. The concrete wasn't just illegal, it was toxic, leaching chemicals into the groundwater. Miles's evidence photos, measurements, and Miller's confession sealed Sterling's fate. Miller, racked with guilt, revealed Operation Streamline aimed to expand Summit Ridge by 12 lots, with buyers already lined up at $3 million each. By week's end, Vance uncovered Sterling's embezzlement of $750,000 in HOA funds, funneled to cover his schemes. Meanwhile, Summit Ridge's homes were collapsing, mold-infested basements, cracked foundations, and property values plummeted. Patricia Donovan, whose $4 million mansion was now a health hazard, hired a lawyer, sparking a homeowner rebellion. Grace Sullivan called Miles that night. We're voting Sterling out tomorrow. Bring your evidence. The clubhouse was packed, the air electric with anger. Sterling's emails, leaked to Grace, revealed his paranoia, accusing everyone from Miles to the Weather Service of a conspiracy. Homeowners shared horror stories, ruined art studios, dying gardens, health risks from mold. Miles's presentation bank records, Miller's testimony, and photos of survey stakes marking Sterling's planned wetland grab left the room stunned. Patricia Donovan dropped the final blow, Sterling's history of fraud in 3 states, leaving communities with sinkholes and debts. The vote to oust him was unanimous. As Sterling stormed out, Vance and 2 officers stopped him. We have questions about fraud and environmental crimes, she said. Miles snapped a photo as Sterling's empire crumbled. 3 months later, Miles stood in court beside his lawyer, Sarah Chun, facing Sterling's $10 million defamation suit. The gallery brimmed with residents and reporters. Judge Miriam Hayes, known for hating baseless lawsuits, eyed Sterling, who represented himself after no lawyer would take his case. His claims that Miles had engineered the flooding collapsed under Sarah's evidence, satellite images, environmental reports, and a video of a bribed official. Sterling's rants about conspiracies only dug his grave deeper. Hayes dismissed the suit and referred Sterling for criminal prosecution. Outside, Vance announced a restoration project to remove the toxic concrete, funded by Summit Ridge's insurance. Grace showed Miles a news alert. Sterling's company was bankrupt, with millions hidden offshore. Weeks later, Miles watched crews in hazmat suits break apart the concrete, the creek's first trickles returning. Sterling faced 5 years in prison for fraud, embezzlement, and environmental crimes. The feds recovered $3 million, reimbursing homeowners. Summit Ridge's homes, once worth millions, sold at half price. But a real community emerged. Potlucks replaced stuffy meetings, and Grace's new bylaws curbed HOA power. Miles's cabin became a symbol of resilience, featured in magazines as sustainable living. His photo exhibition, When HOAs Implode, drew crowds. Its centerpiece, a shot of Sterling's courtroom meltdown. As Miles stood on his porch, a heron gliding over the restored creek, he reflected on the irony. Sterling had tried to bury him, but ended up sinking himself. Sometimes, justice flows like water, finding its level with relentless force.